I found the crown of France in the gutter and placed it atop my own head.
How did the man who spoke French with a strong accent, a man who was born on a small island of Corsica, rise to become one of the greatest figures not only in the French history, but also in European and the world history in general? Many historians blame the meteoric rise of Napoleon on things such as the French Revolution and the fact that old political structures were destroyed. They say that this gave an opportunity to Napoleon to sail through and proclaim himself to be an emperor. I am sometimes fascinated and stupefied by the simplicity of explanations by some modern historians, because everyone who has read at least one great book on the French Revolution knows that this period in French history was full of even more struggles for political power than it was during the times of kings and queens. There were many ambitious men who tried to gain the grip on power, who were at each other's throats, trying to tear each other apart. And that the fact that Napoleon, from a small island of Corsica, with his strong accent in French, managed to rise to become an emperor is even more surprising and shocking and fascinating. But let's not get too focused on Napoleon being emperor, because it's not the reason why we admire him. The reason we admire him is not even in the fact that he became one of the gods of war, as some people used to say about him.
But I follow in the footsteps of Alexander the Great and Caesar.
Evil minds that plot destruction.
Napoleon, of course, stands at the pedestal of great generals such as Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Hannibal, Gustavus Adolphus. But the reason why we admire Napoleon is because he shows us the power of the individual, the power of the soul. He is the embodiment, personally to me, of what Nietzsche proclaimed to be an Ubermensch, a man who rules his own passions and is in control of his own destiny. We admire Napoleon because we want to mimic him, not mimic him in just military matters. Most of us are not going to become generals. We want to mimic Napoleon in his vigor, in his ambition, in his intelligence, in his ability to turn struggles and obstacles into opportunities. And in this video, I would like to share with you 5 books that can show us how we can mimic Napoleon. Napoleon will always fascinate us, and strong people will always try to mimic him, to imitate him in his greatness to achieve high results in life. While the weak people, as always, will try to do everything to overthrow him from the pedestal of greatness. For those of you who would like to achieve more in life, who would like to mimic great people the way Napoleon did himself back in his youth, I would like to recommend you 5 amazing books. There are tens of thousands of books written about Napoleon, and I cannot say that I've read all those. I read only perhaps 70 or 80 books on Napoleon, but those 5 books are going to be the best ones for you to get acquainted with Napoleon and start to imitate his greatness. You and I, if we are strong people, if we believe in ourselves, and if we believe in the power of our soul, limitlessness of our soul, we know that one of the ways to become great is to mimic the great. So the first book on this list that I would like to share with you, that will show you the greatness of Napoleon and tell you how you can mimic him, is a biography of Napoleon written by Emil Ludwig, who was an early 20th century biographer who wrote the biographies of the greatest men who ever lived. Men such as Goethe, politicians such as Bismarck, and of course Napoleon himself. Emil Ludwig writes as Victor Hugo. He imitates Victor Hugo. You read Napoleon's biography written in style of Les Miserables, full of passion, full of greatness, full of facts. And while Hugo's novel was obviously fictional, this book is telling a true story of a man who tried to always overcome himself. Wonderfully written book. It is one of the greatest books I've ever read. I've just destroyed and dismantled its spine. Reading this book is a feeling as if you're watching an action film which teaches you how to live. It is very similar to like watching Ridley Scott's Gladiator, you know, like you at some point try to mimic the greatness of Maximus, but Maximus was a fictional character, while Napoleon was a true figure whom we can mimic. Napoleon himself learned about how to be great from writers such as Plutarch, historians such as Plutarch. He read the biographies of the great generals and political figures of the past of the ancient Rome and mimicked them. He was an obsessive reader. He read, I think, thousands, tens of thousands of books throughout his lifetime. Together with Emil Ludwig's biography, you can read in parallel the book called The Mind of Napoleon, a selection from his written and spoken words, edited and translated by J. Christopher Harold. This is going to be a challenging task for you to find. I stumbled upon it in a second-hand bookstore. This book is brilliant because it contains quotes and ideas of Napoleon on a variety of topics and subjects. As I said, not all of us want to become military commanders, right? But this book focuses on what Napoleon thought about things such as nations and people, or the art of ruling, or science and arts, or political order. You see how his mind worked. You see the man and you can mimic him by his own opinions, by selecting the opinions that you agree with, that challenge your current way of thinking, and start mimicking them. So this book, The Mind of Napoleon, a selection from his spoken and written words, I'll include links to all of those books, but I want to give a small disclaimer that I might not find this online. If I do, it will be included in the description. The next book that I would like to recommend you to read is Ruth Sker's book called Napoleon and His Gardens. Napoleon was very passionate not only about military matters, but also about science. He used to correct some of the greatest scientists that lived at his time. And Ruth Sker's book explains and shows this side of Napoleon, his passion for botany, for maths, for physics, for different elements that surround us. He always explored every side of science, and this is the reason why Ruth Sker begins her book by quoting Paul Valéry, who was one of the greatest French poets of the modern time. Paul Valéry said that it's a shame that Napoleon spent his career on military matters, because if Napoleon focused his brilliant mind on science, we might have witnessed another Galileo, another Copernicus, another Newton. And I believe that it is true. Everyone who I've read, who I've spoken to, who specialize in Napoleon, they say that he had a very brilliant scientific mind. This book is just a wonderful introduction and depiction of Napoleon's scientific side. And I would think that someone who wants to mimic the military ambition of Napoleon in science needs to read this book. If you want to become a scientist, not a military general, but you want to have ambition, vigor, audacity, passion of Napoleon, I think it's worth reading this book. It will reveal a different side of you. You'll start mimicking Napoleon in his scientific pursuits. And if you want to get acquainted with this book before purchasing it, I would recommend you to listen to my interview with Ruth Sker herself. I've interviewed her. She gives a brilliant introduction to her book. It will be linked down in the description below. Next book is written by Cynthia Zaltzman. It's called Napoleon's Plunder, and it tells the story of Napoleon's relationship with the masterpieces of art. Of course, Napoleon is far from being perfect. He plundered a lot of treasures of the European masterpieces of art in Italy and brought it to Paris, to France, to kind of glorify his empire at that time. But as they say that only great men make great mistakes, and Napoleon's Plunder tells the story of what kind of value did Napoleon see in art. We know that throughout his life he appreciated artists. He always wanted the greatest masterpieces of art to be in France, not only for the reason of wealth, but also because he knew that great art is what makes a nation great. A great nation cannot produce mediocre art. If you want your empire to be great, you also have to nourish great artists. I think someone who wants to integrate that artistic side, to increase their ambition, their rigor, their power, their desire to live, I think one needs to read this book and see how a great and ambitious man such as Napoleon used art in his own political and personal purposes. The fifth and the final book, I left it till the end because this book is more to the people who want to dive deep into Napoleon's life and know everything in detail. In contrast to Emil Ludwig's biography of Napoleon, this book is much deeper. It is Andrew Roberts' book called Napoleon, and if you would like to dig deeper into each part of Napoleon's life, to know every detail, to mimic some of those details, I would really recommend you to read this book by Andrew Roberts. He's one of my favorite historians. I read his biography of Churchill, which was wonderfully written. This biography of Napoleon is also wonderful. But once again, I would like to say that this is for the people who want to dig deeper. And I believe that after you read Napoleon by Emil Ludwig, The Mind of Napoleon, then like I have somewhere here hidden the Ruth Skirts and Cynthia Zaltzman's book, you would like to dig deeper. I hope this list is useful to you. I think that those are really great books to read, either separately, one by one, or on their own, before watching Ridley Scott's film about Napoleon. I'm recording this early November, so I haven't seen the film yet, but I believe that Ridley Scott will be very much inspired by this book. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other books that you have read about Napoleon that you think I've missed, that other viewers would like or need to know, please leave a comment, write down what do you think about those books. And of course you can always subscribe to my newsletter where I explore books and ideas much deeper than in the short 10-minute videos on YouTube. Thank you once again for following me, and I'll see you in the next one.